There are 5 main rules in zoos in place today that ensure that animals there can live comfortably. These are called the 5 freedoms. These are the freedom from hunger and thirst, which means that there must be fresh water and a diet which can maintain full health. The freedom from discomfort, which means that an appropriate environment must be provided. This must include a comfortable resting area and shelter from the elements. The freedom from pain, injury and disease, which means treatment and fast diagnosis must be provided. The freedom to express normal behaviour, which means enough space, proper facilities, and a company of the animal's own kind must be provided. The freedom from fear and distress, which means the animal's conditions must be met with treatment to avoid mental suffering. The Bramble Report from December 1965 said that farm animals must have the freedom to stand up, lie down, turn around, groom themselves and stretch their limbs, which can sometimes be called Bramble's 5 freedoms. Because of this, the Farm Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, or the FAWAC, was created, but then was disbanded in July of 1979 when the British government created the Farm Animal Welfare Council, or the FAWC. These bodies started to list the rules and provisions that should be made in farms for farm animals in these 5 categories, which then became known as the 5 freedoms. The 5 freedoms affect today's legislation because zoos nowadays are not just solely for entertainment like they were originally. Zoos must focus on things like researching that animal, the conservation of animals, the education, and the fact that zoos must adhere to the 5 freedoms put in place as well as other government legislations and their organisations' legislation. There are 2 legislation acts that have been put into place. The first being the Dangerous Wild Animal Act of 1979, which is in place to regulate the keeping of wild animals. They aim to ensure that there is not only a suitable environment that the animals are living in, but also that the animal cannot escape, that the animal has a private area where it can go to be away from the public. It must have suitable bedding, suitable amounts of food and water, and that there are measures put into place to prevent any diseases. The second being the Zoo Licensing Act of 1981, which is in place to inspect and license all zoos so they are able to operate. The inspections get carried out by a member of their local authority and also a veterinary surgeon. The Zoo Licensing Act ensures that an animal or a collection of animals are kept in a suitable environment and that the animal or animals can express their natural behaviour. The British and Irish Association of Zoos and Aquariums, also known as BIAZA, have over 100 zoos and aquariums who commit themselves to the conservation and education standards which BIAZA holds. BIAZA is a member of the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, aka WAZA, and the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums. The Bellied Directive is a piece of legislation which is used in zoos when transporting animals. It is a directive that rules how people should be importing, exporting or moving live animals, certain pets and germplasm, which will be used for conservation or display. There are a large list of animals that are covered by Bellied. There are many animals in the directive, such as monkeys, apes, lemurs, aye-ayes, llamas, giraffes, hippos, jackals, wolves, foxes, brown bears, pandas and raccoons, and many more. For a zoo to transport live animals, they must have transporter authorisation, a certificate of competence, and a vehicle approval certificate. These are all issued in Northern Ireland and are used in Great Britain. This also ensures that ungulates like deers, hippos, and camels, and also animals like whales and dolphins, cannot be imported from non EU countries to the UK unless they are in agreement with the Animal and Plant Health Agency, or APHA in Scotland, England, and Wales, or from the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, or DAERA, in Northern Ireland. This also ensures that live animals or germplasm can be checked before they enter into the country. BIAZA has a lot of ties with other welfare organisations: the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, Conservation Breeding Specialist Group, who specialise in trying to save threatened species by improving how effective conservation efforts are worldwide. Species 360, or most commonly known as ZIMS, are the Zoological Information Management Software, which used to be called ISIS, or International Species Information System, who collect information about the animals who are in human care. The European Endangered Species Programme, or EEP, who focus on keeping a record and the conservation of healthy populations of animals, while being able to keep track of and safeguard the health of the animals who are under their care. And the European Stud Book, or the ESB, keep a record of all the stud animals, which can help zoos and collections know exactly which animals they are mating their animals with to maintain a healthy gene pool. The International Union for Conservation of Nature, which supports scientific researches like field projects and helps bring governments, organisations and communities to implement policies and laws. The Association of British and Irish Wild Animal Keepers help with the conservation of wild animals. The World Land Trust protects the habitats and creates and builds reserves. The Wildlife Trusts work on the recovery of land and its nature as well as the sea. The Journal of Zoo and Aquarium Research is a platform for people to publish their studies in zoo biology fields, behaviour, genetics, medicine, nutrition, population management, and reproduction numbers. The Shape of Enrichment, or SHAPE for short, promotes worldwide environmental enrichment for captive animals and encourages improvements in animal welfare with education and international knowledge exchange, or enrichment theory and the applications of those enrichments. It is not mandatory for a zoo to gain membership to BIAZA. However, if the zoo chooses to join, the welfare standards then put onto the zoo is far higher and far stricter than that of just adhering to the laws of their country on animal welfare. Some examples of Scottish zoos under BIAZA is Amazonia, which is near South Lancashire, Blair Drummond Safari and Adventure Park near Stirling, Deep Sea World in Fife, and the Scottish Deer Centre, which is also in Fife. Zookeepers have a special responsibility to help ensure the animals' health and safety. They must carry out certain daily tasks which can vary from zoo to zoo, but generally, zookeepers will have to feed the animals, administer medication, cleaning and maintaining the animal's enclosure, reporting any unusual changes to the animal's behaviours to vets or managers, assist with certain veterinary procedures, and keeping a record of what is in the zoo, any changes in numbers, healthy and unhealthy behaviours, and so on. You could know if a zoo is adhering to good welfare standards easily by looking at both the animals, for example their appearance, do they look healthy, are they lazing around, and their enclosures. An example of good animal welfare is if animals are being fed the right amount, and this can be seen if the animals look visibly underweight or obese. Another indicator is whether the animal has enough space in its enclosure, whether it looks bored within its enclosure, and if it's not showing signs of distress, such as yelling, being abnormally inactive, or pacing around in its enclosure. Red-bellied lemurs are almost exclusively herbivores, but can eat some types of flowers, soils, funguses, and leaves, along with the fruits and vegetables they will eat daily. Red-bellied lemurs will find their food by foraging. They will stay at medium and high altitudes and forage for their food. One member of the group will keep watch for any threats, and they will do so taking turns, making sure every member is both fed and safe. They prefer to get their food at night time, simply because this is a lot easier for them to hide from their predators, who are the fossa and domestic dogs and cats. In captivity, red-bellied lemurs may be fed a variety of fruits and vegetables. Red-bellied lemurs in captivity are best fed twice a day, one in the morning and once in the afternoon. They will need a variety of different fruits and vegetables such as aubergine, carrot, sweet potato, beetroot, sweet corn, celery, pear and apple. These may be scattered around the enclosure at different levels and heights. The food represented to red-bellied lemurs in captivity must be represented away from their sleeping area and scattered around the different areas and up into different levels and heights so that the red-bellied lemurs can get both mental and physical stimulation. Food is presented in such a way because it mimics the natural foraging behaviours that they would perform in the wild, climbing and searching for their food. There are many factors which may lead to uncharacteristic behaviours. These can arise for many reasons, such as the enclosure being unsuitable or too small, a poor diet, little to no enrichment, underlying issues with health, or incorrect amounts of food and water. All collections should strive to the highest standard of welfare possible. Uncharacteristic behaviours can occur for many reasons, especially when the animal's welfare needs are not being met. For example, boredom from a lack of enrichment, being fed an unsuitable diet, or being fed too much or too little. The environment is not suited for the animals. You may want to ask yourself questions like, is the enclosure large enough? Is the enclosure tall enough for the animals to jump or climb if needed? Is the enclosure at the correct temperature suited for the animal? Does the enclosure have suitable flooring which will not hurt the animal's hands, paws, or hooves? Does the enclosure contain any materials which are harmful to the animal inside? Is the enclosure dark or light enough for the animal that's there? And is the environment too loud for the animal? A carnivorous species such as the European wolf may show some uncharacteristic behaviours when their needs are not met. They may show signs of salivation, pacing, depressive episodes, showing aggression, resting excessively, and fighting with other pack members. And a herbivorous species like the red-bellied lemur could also show some uncharacteristic behaviours when their needs are not met. When red-bellied lemurs' needs are not met, they may start rocking, become slow or lethargic, losing appetite, teeth scraping, or self-inflicting injuries. Being hand-reared is advised against because the animal is far less likely to learn the natural behaviours they would perform being naturally fed, or learn how to feed themselves later on in life. Being hand-reared could also deny the animal of both the natural milk from the mother and the knowledge of how to interact and bond with their own species, and because of this may not be able to find its own food, defend itself from natural predators, and react to its own kind as it matures. However, hand-rearing causes particular problems within primates. Even just being separated from the mothers early to hand-rear can often cause both stress-related and physiological problems and behaviour problems that can carry on to adulthood. This is likely due to the social isolation that hand-rearing can cause. It is particularly predominant in macaques, baboons, chimps and marmosets. They will likely struggle to connect with the animals of their own kind properly, and this will negatively impact their communication skills, the ability to learn, the ability to carry out simple tasks such as eating and drinking, their ability to explore new areas, their ability to respond in their own social situations, and their ability to reproduce. Hand-rearing with chimps and macaques were documented to be more likely to engage in behaviour that was likely to injure themselves. To prevent animals from pre-feeding anticipation, keepers can use methods such as changing the times in which the animal is fed, or providing the animal with puzzles and enrichment as it takes longer for the animal to eat their food. This will keep both the animal's mind and their body active rather than quickly eating all their food at once. Another method to stop unusual behaviour such as boredom would be to change the animal's environment if possible. For example, changing the heights and arrangement of ropes for a climbing animal, or moving around furniture, or giving smaller or smarter animals toys and puzzles. Changing around the animal's environment can give some extra mental stimulation to help prevent boredom. An ethogram, put simply, is a chart showing the frequency of certain animals' behaviours over a set period of time. For example, resting, eating and playing may be recorded in 5-minute intervals for 2 hours to observe the frequency of those behaviours and why those behaviours may be occurring. Time of day and weather should also be recorded to ensure certain animals' behaviours are not just because of the weather or other environmental factors. Ethograms are particularly helpful when wishing to observe what things may need to change in an animal's enclosure if it is captive. For example, an animal who is excessively resting may need some more enrichment. To record the red-bellied lemurs, lots of ethograms were taken over a period from November to May at different times of the day, along with recording before and after enrichment ethograms. It was hypothesized that when the enrichment program was put into place, that the lemurs will move around more and be more active. For example, they would display more active behaviours, such as climbing and playing, and displaying less of the lazy behaviours of resting. Data analysis can be used along with the use of the ethograms to show trends in the animal's behaviour. This can help give logical reasons to see why an animal is acting in a certain way, and can also statistically and visually show how, for example, an animal's behaviour is changing when enrichment is added, and recording these behaviours before and after can show if using that enrichment is affecting and lowers undesirable behaviours and raises desired behaviours. Camperdown are meeting the welfare standards for the red-bellied lemurs. There are multiple layers and heights that they can go to within their enclosure. The current welfare standards for the lemurs at the moment is quite good, but has a little room for improvement. The layout of the enclosure is great, especially with all the stumps, ropes, different height, and there is not much things to improve, apart from the amount of feeding toys could be increased. We implemented an enrichment program which consisted of inserting fruits and vegetables into some wooden balls, which would hang at different heights. The idea was that the lemurs would then have to use both their mind and their bodies to get their food, since sometimes it was just presented all together on a single platform for them to easily reach. We hoped that with this particular enrichment that the lemurs would then climb around in the enclosure more and spend less time resting. We implemented an enrichment program which consisted of inserting fruits and vegetables into some wooden balls, which would hang at different heights. The idea was that the lemurs would then have to use both their mind and their bodies to get their food, since sometimes it was just presented all together on a single platform for them to easily reach. We hoped that with this particular enrichment that the lemurs would then climb around in the enclosure more and spend less time resting.
Oh my god, I hope they don't get their heads stuck in these.
I'm sure they will. Only female people. I think that's the reason I hate Sophie Connor today, because she was on the bad side. I don't think that's what you hate her. No, it's
I want to see them use the clearing roll.
I know. I don't actually know if they're going to use that. It'd be great if they did.
One of them was nearly on.
Oh, look!
Go on, son.
Yeah!
Just wait for that string to go.
Oh no! Oh, it's the actual wood that snapped. That's annoying.
Because it's just twigs.
Yay!
But they've used it, they're using it.
Yeah, exactly.
I know, you have done such a good job.
I know. Issue
How
with my
would you
enrichment
use-
is you're going to throw my enrichment in, it's just going to disappear.
It's
Well,
synced to
there we go.
Also be there for maybe an hour at most, and then just
Oh well, at least they've used that.
Should I try to put like bits of fruit?
Here we can see, with these before and after enrichment charts, that the enrichment definitely did work. The main behaviour we were looking to decrease was the resting behaviours, which did work. Resting decreased by an average of 7 average occurrences to 5.5 average occurrences, with a difference of 1.5 average occurrences, which was not really the drastic change we were hoping for, but this was still an improvement, which was what we were looking for. Meanwhile, the average number of times vocalization shot up to an average of 5 occurrences to 15 average occurrences after the enrichment was put in, with a rise of 10 more average occurrences. Observing increased by an average of 3 average occurrences to 11.5 average occurrences, with the difference of 8.5 average occurrences, which was a surprise to have increased by such a large degree, but in hindsight this was to be expected because the enrichment was something new that was added to their enclosure, so they were likely to be a lot more alert after this was put in. Lastly, the climbing occurrences rose sharply from only 2.5 average occurrences to an average of 9 average occurrences, leaving a fairly large difference of 6.5 average occurrences, which was also to be expected because this particular enrichment was added to rise this behaviour. I think our enrichment went quite well. We did see fewer resting behaviours within the lemurs. If we were to do this type of enrichment again, we would probably either move the position of the woven wood balls or take turns around with them having that enrichment in their enclosure. It turned out that by the next week we had gone, the lemurs were visibly less interested in their enrichment, but were still using it. Taking the turns about Having the enrichment in for a few days and taking it out for a few days and repeating that cycle would likely help keeping this enrichment entertaining for them.